Wealth inequality is at the highest level we have seen since before the Great Depression. And this isn't a phenomenon in the United States, it is across the world. Now, wealth inequality has been a big issue. Wealth has concentrated in the top 10%. This has become a major issue. Now, where is this coming from? How did we get to this point? The invisible forces that are concentrating wealth not only at the top, but creating more billionaires as a percentage of the population than we have ever seen are powerful. And for the most part, we don't even know that they're happening. The government is the largest driver of wealth inequality that we have. And I am going to show you the 3 ways that the government creates billionaires and concentrates wealth at the top 1%. Now, first of all, when you're talking about wealth and you're talking about billionaires and how many of them are, of course, there is going to be more billionaires today than there was 30, 40 years ago. First, the population has grown, but also the value of money has changed. $1 million isn't what it used to be. So to have the same effect of having millions, you have billions today. So with those 2 things, it is of course logical that we would just have more billionaires. What's important is how many billionaires do we have as a percentage of the population? And that is where we have seen it skyrocket. That could also include, though, the value of money and how that has changed. So we also need to look at the concentration of wealth. And as we can see, the concentration of wealth in the top 10% has gotten to levels that we have not seen since the 20s. There has been a clear change. And what changed that drove this inequality? And what has changed within our economy and the world that has made it so this could even be possible? The changes are large, a complete change in the way that governments run and govern the economies. The large economies across the world, particularly in first world countries, went through a massive shift to fiat currency. Now, this changed the value of the dollar as well as a lot of things, but it's not why. They did this so the government could take on and borrow money. All right, what does the government borrowing money have to do with concentration of wealth and creating billionaires? Everything. You see, in order to borrow money, you need to be able to pay for it. So the government wants to borrow, and we want cheap interest rates. So the government created a system with the central banks so that we could have liquidity in the market and debt, which would grow the economy. And it did. And it worked really, really well. Now, the thing with debt, though, is it's not even. And who has the availability of it, who gets it, and how they use it is not even. And that's why we see a direct correlation with interest rates and the concentration of wealth within the top 10%. Now, we can take this a step further and we can look at this chart as well. You see, that is directly in line with the amount of borrowing or debt that the government took on. It is also in line with the amount of billionaires as a percentage of the population. And there's no clearer picture of this than the change after 2006 and 7. Now, what was that change? The Great Financial Crisis. Now, what that did was, although a lot of billionaires went under and a lot of corporations went bankrupt, it dropped the cost of money to making it almost free, but it limited the access. As you can see here, we can see interest rates, or the Fed's fund rates, and the percentage of billionaires in the population. They are exactly correlated. Now, the reason being is the government needed to take on huge amounts of debt. It bailed the entire system out. Now, the bailouts were wide-ranging, but they were principally focused in the financial sector. Now, billionaires are spread across the board, but what does happen is when government spending, debt come into play, it moves and concentrates at the top. And in times of crisis, it does it to select individuals. Why? Because The rest are going under. Now it even gets worse. The next problem you have is, what do you do with the money? When you have cheap, easy debt and you're the only one that can get it, you buy your competitors out. You see, debt has another thing. That fuels consolidation, meaning the big buy the small, because what they make off their competitors versus what they can borrow at is a really nice spread when money's free. So they start buying everyone up. And this fuels corporations. It also fuels their share prices, which create more and more billionaires and make more and more billionaires wealthy. But the government's here to protect us. Hence the reason why we have regulations. I mean, after all, over the last 16 years, for the most part, we had a party in favor in the United States that was all about regulating big business, keeping them in check. Now, here's the part we may not understand, is regulation is a dream for billionaires. In fact, they want it. As regulation piles up, billionaires get richer. There is a direct correlation of the top 10%, 1% in billionaires gaining wealth and increase in regulation. Why? It's not complicated. In fact, it's easy. It's just not fair. That's the problem. As we can see, over time, regulation has piled up to amounts that had been unbelievable previously. This creates massive complexity. Complexity means you have to hire attorneys, and it costs a lot of money. This creates an uneven playing field, where once again, who wins? The big. In fact, the stark contrast of regulation can be seen alone in its cost, like it is here. Regulation costs small businesses double what it does corporations at least. By some estimates, the regulations don't actually end up even implying costs to large corporations at all. It's actually built in, and the effect on them is almost nothing. While on the other side, regulations drown competitors and businesses and seize up their ability to function. They don't have the resources, the people, the know-how. So they have to pay for all of these things, but they don't have the money to pay for it. It's essentially the government killing your competitors for you. So you have a government that is actively drowning out small, mid-sized businesses while we have low interest rates so they can take on more debt. Now you have a playing field that is skewed wildly. The big have essentially free money, and they have the means to deploy it, while their competitors have to pay much, much higher money to borrow, which they can't afford, and they have to pay outside sources and get help to deal with regulation just to stay in business. The cost of regulation, as in just the licensing and else, is disproportionate to those small businesses, therefore creating an environment that is ripe for takeovers. The corporations, just by being big, have massive margins, unfair competitive advantage. They buy smaller businesses with free money or almost free money in the form of debt, who have low margins and are struggling. They put it in their business, and now that cost of regulation and capital is gone. They have more efficiencies, they can lay off employees and have more profit margin. Doing so, they also eliminate competitors competing on the market share, so they gain market share. And this continues and continues and continues. In fact, within the government, corporations, billionaires are largely the ones that are working hand in hand to develop regulation. Regulation doesn't hurt big business. It doesn't hurt the top 10%, and it definitely doesn't hurt billionaires. It's what they want, because it allows them to have an incredible advantage. In fact, a disadvantage that makes it so new competitors lots of times won't even get involved. We're in Mississippi right now, and we're turning this storage facility around. Now, lots of people are out trying to buy facilities, small ones that range everywhere from $300,000 to $4 or $5 million. Now, they're worried about getting the money or having the financing. This is why we team up with Live Oak Bank, because they get this. They understand storage. In fact, we have them help us underwrite deals for our students and others, because they are one of the best people in the industry when it comes to getting loans, especially small business loans. They can actually help the customers when they find the asset, understanding how much debt can I get? What's it going to look like? Not just because of the customer they're working with, but because of their knowledge base. That changes them from being a bank to being a real asset to the customer. We recommend Live Oak Bank to our students as well as others that are trying to get into the storage business. They have an in-depth knowledge of this asset class, so it's more than a bank, it's more than simply getting money. They're actually an asset and a partner to them, helping them go through all the things that they don't know and understand. And number 3, the government just existing. What I mean by that? You see, the government has become a major portion of the United States economy. As you can see here, over 40% of it, spending trillions and trillions of dollars. What they're doing is they're borrowing money from a central bank. Then they're spending that money into the economy, fake money, that goes into the economy grows. And as we can see, government spending, just normal on an annual basis, is also not distributed equally. In fact, over 70% of all money that is spent by the government goes to corporations and the biggest of the big. So now you have government that is stomping out your competitors. You have access to cheap, easy capital to reinvest into your business to become better, buy out your competitors, and you have the government that's going and borrowing money to spend in an economy of which 75% goes to you. This is why we see such a massive change in 2008. It's directly correlated. The concentration of billionaires as a percentage of the population, the concentration of wealth in the top 10%, low interest rates, combined with increasing regulation and a government that is borrowing and spending like they never have. This props up assets. It makes assets rise because the government is devaluing money and creating inflation. Inflation rises assets. Who benefits are asset holders and owners, which is the top 10%. This is a very bad system. It is financial engineering, and it is fake. That 50% of spending of the government that's becoming the economy isn't real. They're borrowing it. Now, it makes it so it's even worse. Why? Because taxpayers and small businesses have to pay taxes to pay off the debt that the government took in that went to corporations. One of the best examples is in 2008, after the bailouts, the vast majority of that money went to a handful of corporations. Now, it wasn't because the government paid it out, it went to the citizens. But the citizens had to purchase things and they had to buy things, which they did from a few competitors like Apple and others. During COVID, this was exaggerated beyond belief. Small businesses weren't allowed to operate like corporations could, literally saying these people can be open and these people can't. And better yet, we're going to take on debt, give it to the businesses, the big businesses, small businesses, yes, but disproportionately, we're also going to give it to the people, and we're going to tell them they can only use these people in the marketplace. This is just corporations swapping up money that taxpayers are borrowing, government is spending, and they're stopping competitors through regulation while being fueled by cheap debt to reinvest and buy their competitors when they're struggling, like when they're shut down by the government itself. So they can't even compete. They sell out to bigger corporations. These are forces that are so big and so massive, they cannot be just fought against. This isn't about having a better product or a better service. That's not how this works. This isn't capitalism that is creating these billionaires. In fact, if you just took out the government borrowing and spending, the percentage of billionaires per capita, or as a percentage of the population, would go down dramatically. In fact, it would go down to levels prior to 2005. This fueling of the top 10% is gotten out of control. Now you may say taxes. Why aren't you talking about taxes? There's a reason why I'm not talking about taxes, as in the tax breaks that the top 10% and 1% get vary wildly. And in the United States, the top 10% pays the majority of all the taxes, and small businesses get great tax advantages. So that is actually not nearly as much as an unlevel playing field. It's not even though. Billionaires don't pay the same. Why? Because of tax loopholes, not because of applied taxes. And guess where that comes from? The government. That is part of regulation. As you can see here, this is the tax code and complexity. If you have to work within a tax code and complexity, that means you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to CPAs, attorneys, to avoid paying taxes or getting to the same tax rate, you can't even afford it. So although it may be even and the tax code may be the same for everyone, like regulation, like debt, you don't have access to it. Although it's even, you don't get to participate. Complexity in both the tax code, total regulations overall, benefits those that can afford to take advantage of it. So the tax code, although it is complex, even if you took the savings from the billionaires or charged them more, let's say you increased taxes dramatically on the top 10% and 1%, that still would not solve the problem. In fact, it wouldn't even put a dent in this problem. The problem between government spending, regulation, tax code, and cheap debt is trillions upon trillions of dollars. These are structural things that whether a tax rate goes up or down is almost irrelevant because it's keeping out competitors, it's giving cheap debt. And if you increase the tax rate, you have to do it for everybody, meaning you'll just create a more uneven playing field. That's not to say you shouldn't increase taxes. Of course, they need to be even and everyone needs to pay their appropriate amount of taxes. But that's not the problem. The problem is that it's uneven. So you need an even playing field. And so when you do tax people, it's all the same. Meaning that if you increase taxes on the top 10%, even the top 1%, just like regulation, it doesn't affect them all the same. It's disproportionate. You can double billionaires' taxes, but you have to do it for the top 10%. It actually helps consolidate wealth because it's not even. This is the problem. We don't have an even playing field. The more regulations you put, help the wealthy. The more tax code you put, help the wealthy. The more spending and the lower the debt, help the wealthy. This is government intervention, and this creates mass income and wealth inequality because it's not real. All you're doing is taking productivity and resources and you are shifting it into the hands of few. And you're doing so by creating an uneven playing field. So how do you stop massive wealth inequality? You can't do it by simply taxing away. No, you have to go the other route. You have to make it advantageous to be a small business owner and at minimum a level playing field. But it should be advantageous, not just the same playing field, for someone to start a business, to get in, and to be able to scale up. Now, of course, if you're a big business or if you're wealthy, you have advantage of scale as far as structure goes. But that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about the advantages that aren't given by building a big business, by building a great business, one that can function and perform product and services. We are talking about artificially imposed advantages. That is wrong. And they are the most powerful force in wealth inequality. So the key to winning this game, is it throwing your hands up? No, it's education. It's learning how you can play. With all of this disadvantage, it absolutely does create opportunities, but you have to know how to take advantage of them. Education is the most important part. You have to be scrappy to fight against the big guys, but it absolutely can be done. This is why we've created playlists and why we educate people who are entrepreneurs or investors to use the same things the big boys do, like Warren Buffett, which we break down for you. Here's what they do, here's how they're doing it, and here's how you can take advantage.